Okay, we reached the last session, and there's no better way to close the event than going back to the roots of Redis and talking about the people that make the Redis community so special, the developers. Closing the event today, we have Ravit Jain, host of the popular web series The Ravit Show. He's here to have a fireside chat with our developer relations team. Paul Ford, VP of Developer Relations, along with advocates Brian Sam-Bodden and Simon Prickett, will discuss topics such as SQL versus NoSQL, community engagement, and building with Redis in the AI space. Ravit, please take it away.
Welcome to the Fireside Chat with Redis and the Ravit Show. So many great sessions we have had until now. I'm Ravit Jain, founder and host of the Ravit Show. Today we have Paul Ford, VP of Developer Relations, Brian Sam-Bodden, Senior Developer Advocate, and Simon Prickett, Principal Developer Advocate from Redis. In this session, we'll explore Redis's unique features, community building, the SQL versus NoSQL debate, Redis's expansion into the new use cases, the beloved Redis developer experience, the potential of generative AI, and much more. I'm super excited about it, so stay tuned for captivating conversation that will empower developers in choosing the right technology. Let's go. Welcome, Paul, Brian, Simon. It is such a pleasure to host you all today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great to be here today, Ravi. Thank you.
Awesome. So, obviously, to start with, as a highly technical software solution, Redis has a strong focus on developers as well as operators. Let's talk about some of the ways Redis stays in tune with its developer community, since I know you all three kind of closely work with the developer community, so it would be great to get those insights firsthand. So talking about developer relations, it has obviously become more and more important for technology companies everywhere, and developer teams take many forms. Can you tell us a little about DevRel at Redis? What's your mission? What's your focus? Paul, if you can get going with it.
Sure, Ravi. Thank you, first of all, for doing this, and thanks for being here, everybody. It's great to be here. And as you mentioned, as a technology company that's deeply embedded into so many stacks, Redis is really keenly aware of the importance of investing heavily into developer relations and into the developer experience, for sure. So first, let me tell you a little bit about our program. We'll start with what developer relations is here at Redis. So in our view, it's the art and science of building and growing authentic relationships within our communities globally. It's important to know that we don't market to them. We are very much non-transactional, and we follow a very karma-driven give first mantra because we know developers love and appreciate the help and expertise that we bring, and that appreciation comes back to us tenfold over time, for sure. Next is our mission, and that's to engage, educate, and enable developers everywhere to use Redis for all of their projects. Seems really simple, but it's really complicated. Another thing to understand is that we represent the voice of the developer within Redis. So we bring the voice of our global developer communities back to the product and engineering teams to help shape and grow our products and our services. We also bring that voice to marketing and the marketing teams and to others within the company to do things like help validate messaging and grow and refine the programs that they're involved in. And lastly, we work under a well-known model called the 3 C's of developer relations. Now, these 3 C's are the guiding lights for specific functions that we perform here at Redis. And those 3 are content, code, and community. So in a nutshell, that's DevRel here at Redis, and I hope that sets the stage here for our conversation today.
Oh, wow. I love it. I love those 3 C's. It kind of resonates very well with what your mission is and how you're putting Redis forward, because obviously the content that you all have been sharing is pretty good. So I can, thanks for sharing those insights. Another quick question, since you're talking about the content here, one for Simon. So Simon, if folks want to, obviously learn more about Redis, or, obviously where can developers actually go and learn about Redis and also get involved in the Redis community? so they can grow?
Yeah, I think we have a whole load of channels, but there's three that I'm going to pick out. The first one is Redis University, which is more sort of formal, organized learning. You sign up for that. It's free. It's entirely online. And we have currently 10 video-based courses with an 11th in production.
Oh, wow.
The way those work is you basically follow along the materials. Most of them have a GitHub repository that you can clone and create your own Redis instance or use our cloud to do that. And then basically each course is either organized around a programming language. So we have courses for Java developers, Node, .NET, Python, and so forth. And some courses are also organized around features of the product. So if you wanted to learn around search or streaming data or something, we have courses for those. The other channel that you'll see us talk about a lot is we have a Discord server. That originally came about to help university students. Students took the courses and then had questions, and we would interact with them that way because we're globally dispersed and so are the students. India is actually our biggest market for Redis University students. It's where the most people come from. And obviously, we are in different time zones. Brian's towards the west of the US, I'm in the UK, and we have people in US East. So Discord came around for that, but we built it into this wider community where we just want people to come and talk about whatever they're doing. We have channels for literally self-promotion.
Right.
What have you done? What's a project you're proud of? And we try and help people with most things in there. So as part of helping people with Redis issues, I've taught people about the sort of async await syntactic sugar in Node.js, for example, or what a node module is and why that gives you top level await and so on. So we have those. Then finally, the other channel I wanted to point out is our company YouTube. So you'll find the developer relations team. We do these sort of fixed explainer videos that are pre-shot, and then we do a lot of live streaming. So you'll find us on YouTube and also on Twitch. We've done almost 100 live streams across the team in the last year or so, and a lot of those are coding projects, and then they have a GitHub URL with a repo and a nicely done README that you can follow along, and that gives us the option to sort of interact with people in a more real-time way while we're doing it. It also feeds into our conference speaking program, so we might trial something out on live stream. If it resonates, you might see it at a conference.
Yeah.
So that's the main places you can find us regularly and with high quality, authentic content.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of content where people can go and learn from, and definitely having a Discord channel kind of also brings all the developers under one roof to share experiences, but at the same time learn from each other. So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, thanks for sharing. Paul, a quick question. I know for a fact where you're fairly new to Redis, so welcome on board first. You have a long history, ranging from being a startup founder to infrastructure executive. But what brought you to Redis? What was the motivating factor?
Well, that's a great story, Ravit. So for the beginning of the 2000s, I had a good run as a startup co-founder, to various degrees of success before I got into my first kind of corporate job with a company called Rackspace in 2010. And Rackspace is a cloud computing provider, a data center provider, and I came in to help create and grow our tools ecosystem. So very early on, there was this thing that every developer at Rackspace, and there were many, just had to have. It was critical to making the entire infrastructure work for our customers. And it was this little thing called Redis. And so my first touch was at the very beginning as the caching mechanism. And I left Rackspace and went to another data center provider, API-based, high speed, more real time, called SoftLayer in Dallas, Texas. And so Redis was also just widely used by the developers and customers there. So I'm really tuned in, from very early on, is the power of Redis. And from there, I went over to SendGrid, email API provider, and eventually Twilio. And Redis just carried through. I mean, through my entire professional career story arc. there's Redis, 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 and making everything run at or near real time on the internet. So I've been very familiar, but sort of familiar and adjacent to the family. Um, when the opportunity came up to join the team not too many months ago, having discussions with Iftach, one of our founders, and Tim Hall, our chief product officer, and looking at where Redis is today and how much the company has expanded and how we've gone into different functionalities that really build on our expertise in caching. There was just no question. It was a really easy move for me to come in with this experienced DevRel team, over 100 years of software development experience just on this team alone. So it made it very easy for me to say yes to and come in and join the team.
Wow, this is great story, and definitely I think you've always, like, Redis has always been in your career in some or the other way, so you've made the right choice. So thanks for sharing that. You spoke a little about caching, so that kind of brings me to another question, which is around Redis has long been known the caching solution or choice for making internet applications and services run in real time. But what makes Redis unique when compared to other database solutions? I'm pretty sure the audience would love to learn a little about that. I know Brian Sam-Bodden has been quiet for a while. So, Brian, what's your take on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that, and I'll give you a little bit of backstory. For about 10 years, I was working with Redis, but I really didn't know Redis because Redis was the caching layer for pretty much every application we built, but it worked so well that it hid in the background. It never really broke. You only got to learn about Redis when something went wrong, which was very, very rare. Like, let's say
Right.
that's something in your cache wasn't invalidating, and then you went and inspected Redis to find out what was going on. And it dawned to me when I joined Redis that the memory, it's the place where all the action happens. Disk, it's an afterthought. And people think of Redis as a caching solution only because we work very well in memory. But that's where everything happens anyways. So bringing some of your other operations into that space just makes them better. One of the things that you notice in a lot of companies when they're using just relational solutions only, it's that everybody abides by the denormalization fifth normal form everywhere until you need high performance, and that's when you see denormalization in big tables that basically are mimicking what we can already provide for you. So Redis as
Right.
a first line of attack as a database um, kind of gets you there without having to try to outmaneuver your own database. So it's one of those things that the misconception is that Redis is only a key value database, but the difference is that the value can be a lot of different things that are tailor made for specific use cases. So as long as you pair the right data type with the right use case, Redis is an amazing solution for things like that.
Yeah, I think those are pretty good insights, Brian. Thanks for sharing those. Simon, what do you think about it? Like, what makes Redis unique when compared to other database solutions?
Yeah, I think again a little bit of background. A lot of my experience has been with IoT devices and data gathering in the field from like vehicles or sensors or whatever. And the interesting things about those is they're really limited scope. They are very, very, they have limited processing power, memory, all of that stuff. So you want to offload data structures to somewhere else. So
Yeah.
moving things like a queue or a stream, for example, streams was one of the first educational courses I worked on when I joined Redis, and it's still one of our most popular. Moving that sort of thing into a data store that can cope with, for example, streams is fast enough to cope with like 1,000 messages a millisecond or something like that. It uses timestamps that are sub-millisecond, is really useful because all that data is not going to live there forever because it's in memory, but you're going to want to buffer it and make some sense of it and spread it out between different consumer processes. So I do a lot of work around that sort of area. And that was my background. And also, I came from a background of using Redis for deduplicating things. So, have I seen this thing before? If
Mm-hmm.
you've got a load of sensors and they run on a mesh network, they generally send bursts of messages because some of them are just going to bounce around the network and time out. They'll never make it to the server. So, you need to remember if you've seen things before. So, there's data types in there now, like a Bloom filter, which is a sort of probabilistic way of doing that. So sometimes it lies to you and sometimes it doesn't, but it saves a lot of memory. And those are quite interesting things for developers to get into. And then they realize there's all of this other stuff. And oh, now I can put JSON documents in there. So now I can have, like, my stream of incoming data, or I can have maybe a moment in time summary stored there in JSON or a hash or whatever. And then I can use stream consumers to push things out to data warehouses for like long-term storage. So I've sort of
Yeah.
seen a lot of people get interested in, they come from caching or deduplication or queuing, so PubSub, for example.
Yeah.
And then they get into streams, which is like PubSub with persistence. And then from there, it's like, oh, what else can we put in there? And it becomes a sort of gateway to doing lots and lots of things.
Yeah. I think, Simon, those are definitely some interesting points. Paul, what do you think about it?
I think, as Simon mentioned, one of just the keys there is, the ability for developers to grow and discover through our technology stack.
Hmm.
They come for caching and then discover that, through some of these, we can call them tricks, we can call them optimizations, whatever you like. But you can do so many things within the Redis environment, versus just looking at caching. As Simon mentioned, it's a gateway to so much more experimentation and doing other things.
Yeah, I think those are pretty good insights for sure. Quickly, obviously, since I'm on this topic, as I mentioned, Redis is traditionally known as a cache, but now you are expanding into other use cases like search or and data and the document storage. So, how are you prioritizing what to expand into, and how does it look like? What are the challenges that you see, or is it like just the piece of cake? So, any thoughts around that? Maybe Simon, you can start.
Yeah, I think what you've seen us do in the last year or maybe 2 years is spend a lot of time on search. And
Mm,
there's a good reason for that. So Redis is fundamentally key value data store. If you do not know the key of the thing that you are accessing, or you can't infer it from some data you've got, you need some other way of being able to find it and reference it. And traditionally,
right.
people had to build like secondary data indexing themselves, put it in the application. Search moves all of that into the server, and it's this incredibly powerful thing that, again, now my like little tiny sensor with like 250K of memory or whatever can ask the database, go find me all the documents where the temperature was in between this range and it was a Tuesday and all of these other factors. And you
Right.
don't really think about that from a key value data store. But when you want to flip back to key value mode and just be like, get something out of this key because I know it, that's still there and it just
Hmm.
works as well as it ever did. It's big O of one. It's like super efficient. So I think that for me is where you've seen us put a lot of effort into search, initially on Redis hashes and then on Redis JSON documents. And then I'll let
Yeah.
Brian answer where we've gone with search more recently because he's worked with that.
Yeah, Brian, can
Yeah,
you tell us
definitely.
more?
That's yeah, great segue. The way that I see search, it's the great equalizer for NoSQL. So NoSQL databases like Redis have, you know, specific advantages over SQL and some disadvantages. But some of those disadvantages can be, you can bridge that gap with search. So there's a lot of things like typical, SQL-like searches in aggregations that allow you to do some of the things that you would do with a store procedure in, let's say, MySQL. Um, so, but to add on top of that, so Redis can front your application because it's right there where the action happens in memory. It provides the data structures that you need. So as long as you choose wisely, you should be good. And then search adds this extra power to be able to do things in memory or on the edge that otherwise you would have to do a round trip back to some server to get an
Mm-hmm.
answer. And by the time you get the answer, that edge need might have dissipated. So it's a really like I said, the great equalizer for NoSQL databases.
Okay, that's good information, Brian. Thanks for sharing that. Since we are on this topic of SQL, NoSQL, that kind of brings me to another interesting topic for the our which is around SQL versus NoSQL. For a long time, there has been a debate about SQL versus NoSQL databases, and around the trade-off of highly available distributed systems and strong consistency with atomic transactions. How are you guys thinking about these trade-offs at Redis, and how are you getting over those? Brian, maybe you can.
Yes, certainly. So one of the things that I worked in a lot of like banking financial environments where you treat transactions
Mm-hmm,
as the one thing that will protect you from bad things happening. And you notice that they sprinkle transactions around things like it's salt on a meal, and sometimes it's too much.
yeah.
So by being specific about where transactions need to happen and by structuring the data in a way that minimizes the need to use transactions so freely, you can get most of the things that you can do with relational databases, or let's say something like a transaction manager in
Mm-hmm,
NoSQL. Um, in most cases, the 80% use case it's read, and we give you the performance that you need there to succeed at whatever your application does. And then there might be some workarounds to deal with, like two-phase commits and things of that sort, where a transaction manager might be needed. But in my experience, I find that those are the smaller part of the use cases of most applications. So yeah, it requires a little bit of pre-thinking and planning, but the problems are not as exacerbated as like some SQL vendors will try to make them sound. But not only that, I like to think about not think about NoSQL versus SQL. I like to think about not only with SQL.
mm,
So they can still live together. For example, Redis in MySQL, it's like peanut butter and jelly. It's a pairing that basically you find all over the place.
mm,
In the ratio of what you do in Redis versus what you do in MySQL, it's really up to the architects. But you can see that ratio moving towards the Redis side because of performance and the flexibility of the data structures in search that we provide.
mm. This is good information, Brian. Simon, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think also a lot of use cases now kind of have to accept eventual consistency because
Mm-hmm,
even in banking, people basically do everything with plastic now. So there's just an endless stream of transactions. When's that going
exactly.
to end so that I can do a batch forward process? Well, it isn't. So I have to do it in real time, which
Mm-hmm,
means you need to store something at the speed of memory. Do you want to store every transaction ever made in a Redis database? No, you would warehouse that off somewhere else. But yeah, we see a lot of people doing fraud detection type work in there, and also just all of this other, again, back to IoT stuff, streams of data that never end, the ability to summarize them and have like recent memory in something that is lightning fast, and then sort of flush that out to another data store or a warehouse at your leisure while sort of maintaining summaries of it is quite interesting. So, does it make sense for like banking in the sense of run the checking account statement run or run payroll? No, but does it make sense in terms of like tracking real time things, which is what we're all about?
yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think one of our sort of unsung heroes in here is we have these probabilistic data structures, so we have things that will tell you with like a top K, what's the most commonly recurring term in a stream of terms, or what's the most commonly recurring item in a series of social media posts, or whatever it happens
Nice.
to be. And then we have a new one that we added called T Digest that will deal with, like, is this in the bottom 25% or what have you, as well as the ones that we already had for like, have I seen this before, or roughly how many of these have there been total. And again, that gets people used to mentally making some trade-offs between, do I need to be absolutely right in this specific place? Probably not, because we're dealing with real time. Do I need to be
Right.
absolutely right somewhere? Yeah, absolutely. But the ability to like make real-time decisions about things that are really going on now, you get to operate with some uncertainty. So I think people
Mm.
are sort of loosening up on that. Strong consistency is the answer to everything, because it just isn't in these cases.
Yeah, it kind of gets tricky with the real time streaming. So I totally hear you, Simon. All right, shifting gears a bit here in terms of since we have the developer advocate team here, I would love to learn a little about the developer experience. So Redis is consistently rated favorite a favorite database to work with by developers. So what is it about Redis that developers love, and what tools and libraries complement Redis? Paul, what's your initial take? Since I'm pretty sure you're now closely working with a lot of developers, so would love to hear your fresh take on this.
Sure, and I think it's a fresh take, but it's also going to be a very old take on
All
this.
take, right? Right.
And I'm thinking back a little bit to the question you asked earlier about how we prioritize and how we do things. And I'll just
Mm,
touch on that for a second.
yeah.
So, developer relations teams can fall into a number of different places within a company like ours. We're fortunate enough to fall into our chief product officer's organization, Tim Hall, who gave the great keynote for this event earlier. So that voice that we consistently bring back into the company, as I mentioned earlier, the voice of the developer, goes right back into the product and dev teams. And I think we do a good job of listening. And developers notice that and they understand that. We've been able to bring, back to prioritizing what we bring to market. We bring to market what developers need and what they want and what they ask for. So I think that responsiveness coupled with that real-time nature of how our technology works, the simplicity of how it works, how true we're staying always to the original manifesto of simplicity and artistic value in code and making it simple and fast. We just stay true to the ethos of listening and doing a good job of what we do. Now, when we get into the details and libraries and that part, let's talk to some developers in the room here. I think Brian and Simon are going to do a much better job with the rest of that.
Yeah, Brian, what's your take
Yeah,
on that?
certainly. The the developer voice, it's something that you can't just put your ear to the railroad tracks. You have to kind of be shoulder to shoulder with people.
Hmm.
Sometimes somebody at a conference will give you a statement of something that might be bothering them about how they're using the product,
Exactly.
but you never know until they open their laptop and you are touching shoulders, and they're like, "But see, right here, this is the problem. If you guys could do this way, it wouldn't make me do all these other steps." And that's
Mm.
where the value added connection comes. Then we take that straight to our product team. In some cases, we implement the solution ourselves. I myself, I maintain one of our clients for the Spring platform. So I go to Spring conferences, I
Hmm.
see what others are doing, I see what people are running into issues with Redis in Spring, and then I brainstorm with them, sometimes over a couple of beers after a conference session, and we kind of come up with something that everybody's happy with. So being embedded in those communities really gives you a really unlimited uh, insight into how people are using the product.
No, I think 100%, Brian. Good. good example there, where it's obviously you sitting down with the developer and obviously listening, like Paul mentioned, listening to them and understanding at the same time what's the extra step they're doing, and kind of coming to a place where it kind of helps them to take it to the next level in their own project. That's what I think is a big win when it comes to the community as well, because that's what I assume all the communities look from, obviously, advocates like you all. So well done on that. Simon, anything that you would like to add on the libraries and
Um,
tools front?
yeah, I think one of the things that you see a lot with people that come to the product as not new developers, but new to using the product is
Mm-hmm.
it takes them a minute to realize that there's a lot of things you don't have to do. So I've got a blank database. I want to put an item in a list. How do I do that? I put an item in the list. Well, hang on. Where did the list get created? Well, that was done by the data store for you as a side effect of putting the first thing in. Or I want to count numbers. Do I have to set it to 0 to start with? No, you don't. It will just work from a there's a sort of developer mindset where you don't have to constantly write all of this code for, like, if we're in the initial situation, do this, otherwise do that. There's very, very few circumstances where that's necessary with Redis. And that just means that you kind of get on with solving the problem using the data structure and not the sort of theater of schemas or initialization or all of this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think two other things that has happened with Redis, the company, in the last sort of 2+ years is you'll see the Redis Insight tool, which is a visual way of looking at data in there. That just enables people to get a much better mental grip on what's happening in there, and it refreshes real time, and it has these specialized views for all the data structures. So it's a lot
Mm-hmm.
easier than before when you had to approach things with the Redis CLI and like literally know what the command was and go look it up and then figure out what you were looking at. And then also, I think we've done a lot of work, and the community started this with Redis clients, so the SDKs for different programming languages. The Redis company has started sponsoring or actively developing popular clients for major programming languages, so Node, Python, Java. Brian looks after one of those, and we can have conversations with people now where they raise an issue, and we don't have to go and talk to someone else because we look after that client and we can get it fixed for them, or we can discuss it with them. Or in some cases, if it
Nice.
goes beyond like my knowledge, talking to somebody about something on Discord, I can go get my colleague who actually wrote the client and be like, can you come talk to this person? They're having this specific
Yeah.
problem. So I think that whole the footprint of the ecosystem has broadened and become more consistent, and that helps. But it was in a really good place to start with because, as Paul said, Redis had a manifesto. It had like a way of doing things, and it was one person, Salvatore's thing in the first place. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
great clarity of like, when you put something in there, if it doesn't exist, it should create the data type for you. Is a great example, and I find it easy to talk to developers about that sort of stuff. Sometimes you have to get them past that. Where's all this stuff that we're not doing? It's like that doesn't exist. But
Yeah.
once they do, it's like, oh, great, and that means it's great for like hackathons and things. I helped with a hackathon in
100%.
Pakistan last year. People had to choose to use the Redis challenge, and part of what I sort of sold them on it for was, you're not going to spend forever setting up the database. Just write some code that stores stuff. It'll deal with it for you.
Nice. I think these are good points, Simon, that you've shared. Another important topic that I wanted to, obviously discuss was around what we all have been listening since a lot lately, generative AI. And for a fact, where generative AI can do a lot for Redis developers and operators. So, can you tell me more about what are some additional capabilities you see in the AI co-piloting? Would love to learn a little about on that front as well. Maybe Brian, you can tell us more about that.
Yeah, certainly. And Simon and I did a session for the conference, and
Nice.
my portion was vector similarity. So that is a great segue to talk about how Redis, it's a perfect platform to store vectorize machine learning embeddings in memory,
Mm-hmm.
which basically means that you can operate on things that had been classified or um, annotated by a machine learning model in memory, and you don't have to do the round trips back to your application because our search engine handles that. So one example is to take a um, machine learning model pre-trained like GPT-4
Mm-hmm.
and create embeddings for text chunks that you have stored in Redis, let's say on hashes or JSON documents, and then create embeddings and store them in Redis, and then be able to basically say, find all the text passages similar to this text passage in in meaning in a semantic way, and that's basically what's powering a lot of the powerful search experiences nowadays. So Redis becomes a platform of choice for storing embeddings.
Okay. Those are great insights. Simon, anything that you would like to add?
Um, this hasn't hugely been my area of expertise, but one thing I've noticed is that Redis is the sort of back end store for popular feature store products, so things like Feast, and that seems like a really good fit because again, you want that sort of fast access data. You want to be able
Mm-hmm.
to store potentially binary stuff, and Redis doesn't actually care what you put in there. You can encode it anyhow you like. I've recently been doing some things with storing images that I was hoping to do some similarity search on at some point in the future, but mostly what Brian said because he's been working with this more recently than I have.
Awesome. Paul, what's your take on it?
Oh, it's such an interesting space, Ravit. It's so early. There's just so much attention that's been put on it these days. But we've been at this for quite a while. Enabling and empowering a bunch of different technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think LLMs, large language models, by nature of what they are, they're large. It's a lot of data. There's a lot going on in the background, and the human beings currently that need to consume and absorb this information want that information served up at or near real time. And that's just such a great space for Redis to shine, and it just by nature of what we do and how we do it.
Okay, these are definitely great insights. So, just to wrap it up, obviously, I know for a fact it's been a long day for our audience as well. They've had many sessions, but this was amazing. Amazing talk. Thanks for sharing all the insights. But I would like to obviously touch back on developers again for just a moment. We all know that there are many options out there these days. What should developers look for when choosing a product or technology or company to work with? Because no better than you all can tell us about that. So maybe Paul, you can start with your suggestion there.
Sure, we'll notice a theme with me here, Avit. I think folks want to work with technologies that they know are going to be around for a long time. They want to
Mm-hmm.
start with something, grow with something, and bringing Redis back into this. We've been at this a long time. Best in class software. Another thing they look for, from a software vendor like us, is are there other tools in the toolbox? And that's something we've taken a lot of time and effort to really look at the developer experience and what developers need and want to do holistically versus just this one trick pony sort of an aspect. So longevity of the company, how long have they been around, how great is the software, how long are they going to be around, and what other tools can they provide for me as a developer. And I think Brian and Simon have probably got some pretty strong opinions about this as well.
Yeah, maybe Brian.
Yeah, definitely. Um, One of the things that, and I've tried to do this obviously as a developer advocate, it's really bring that voice of the developer into our product development. There's too
Mm-hmm.
many companies that I think work in isolation, and they just throw things over the fence and they say developers go figure it out. Uh,
Yeah.
and that to me, it's it's a way to basically force your own patterns onto the community, and it should be kind of an equalization of your secret sauce technology and how people use things. In
Right.
finding that equilibrium, it's hard. That's a very difficult with APIs, with GUIs, with everything. You're never gonna make everybody happy, but if you listen to everybody, you might come up with something that approaches that.
I think that's a very good point where it's more about the equalization, but at the same time, it's more about getting the right feedback from the community. Because if you are kind of just putting it out there, I think you're missing out on the next opportunity that you can actually pick from learning from the community. So that's a very good point. Thanks, Brian. Simon, what do you think?
Yeah. So, what should developers look for? I think broad support for a range of different programming languages. So you
Mm-hmm.
might work in a .NET shop today, but you might move to somewhere else, or you might do a heterogeneous microservices project where now you've got to do something else. Or what we see recently is, whatever you do is going to become something to do with AI, and a lot of things to do with AI and data science are Python. So I think something that
Exactly.
can be applied equally from a range of languages, which Redis and other products fit nicely into. The clients that we have and work on are now at a sort of nice, consistent standard where you could sort of expect to mix and match quite nicely. And then it becomes about, I think, as Brian said, to start with, that sort of how you choose your data structures and all of that stuff. And I think also just something with an authentic community, whether it's got a commercial company behind it or not. I would hope that our Discord is a place where people that use any form of technology can come and sort of ask questions. And yes, we predominantly talk about, guess what, key value data storage and Redis, but yeah, we also talk about other things. I think people should sort of look for that, and also look for you know, a bank of real world problems that people have solved and shared their experiences with.
Yeah.
So if you go look for who's writing about Redis, it's not just me, Brian, our team who are frankly paid to write about Redis. We're always going to do that. It's people on Dev2, it's people on Medium, it's people building courses on other platforms that aren't Redis University. I mean, I'd love you to take the university courses, but there's other ones out there that are good too.
Exactly.
I have a friend who comes from a robotics background, built a very small Redis course for Python developers just based on a weekend of learning stuff and because he wanted to. And I was like, well, that's amazing.
Wow. Yeah, I think.
And Ravit, I think
Yeah, Paul, go ahead, please.
No, I mean, I think one big thing that we haven't mentioned is great documentation. I think that's huge, as well as cost. Can you try something for free? Our roots go absolutely back to open source, and that is always going to be a focus for us. So the community that we look to build is open to everyone.
Nice. This is amazing. Great points. Obviously, with open source, with building an authentic community out there, and it's not only just about you three, obviously sharing about it, but it's also about the larger community outside who's actually adapting and using Redis day in and out, or creating project or using it for some other things out there is definitely makes Redis very strong and a unique solution out there. One last question. We are almost towards the end, but I'm pretty sure the community would love to obviously want to reach out to you all separately after the session as well. So if you all three can let the community know where can they find you, maybe Paul, if folks want to reach out to you, what's the best place?
Sure, we try to keep things pretty simple. Paul at redis.com. It's as easy as you can get. At
Awesome.
Paul Ford on Twitter. I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn as well. I look like this, so not a lot of confusion there. And yeah, we're just really easy to get in touch with on Discord, pretty much anywhere. We're really, really easy to find, Ravi.
Awesome. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, the Redis Discord would be, I think, the first place that I would point people to.
Mm-hmm.
Via email, I'm bsb@redis.com,
Yeah.
so very easy. I know I have a pretty long name, so just the three letters, it's enough. And I am bsbowden on Twitter and Blue Sky too.
Okay. That's good. Simon, where can people find you?
Yeah, similarly, the usual places, I would push people at Discord if it's a discussion that you think other people would benefit from, because we have all of those discussions in the open. We generally don't do sort of direct messaging threads. We want the community to share issues with the community and get a wide range of perspectives.
Nice.
I'm Simon_Prickett on Twitter rather than the other one who doesn't have the underscore. And I'm Simon at redis.com. So pretty easy to find. But mostly I would say most responsive, probably Discord, because if I don't
Hmm.
answer, somebody else off the team might. If they don't, somebody else from the wider company, because all sorts of
Nice.
people with all sorts of roles are in there. And then we have some community members who are just like super active and really helpful.
That's amazing. So this was a great session. Thank you all three for doing this. An amazing fireside chat. Also wanted to thank our audience who've been with us today. And here we sign off to the Redis Days India. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for attending Redis Days India. We hope you are leaving as excited as we are about what's coming with Redis 7.2 and got some good insights from the great customers that shared their stories with us today. As a final reminder, if you would like to check out any of the links of the resources shared today, you can access them through the QR code on the screen right now. We'll see you soon and enjoy the rest of your day.